Dogs that know when their owners are coming home, and other unexplained powers of animals. Part 1. Human-Animal Bonds. Chapter 1. The Domestication of Animals. Many people love their pets and are loved by them. In this chapter, I explore the evolution and the nature of human-animal bonds. But first, it is important to recognize that emotional bonds between people and animals are the exception rather than the rule. For every well-loved cat or dog, hundreds of domesticated animals are confined to intensive farming systems and research laboratories. In many third-world countries, beasts of burden are often treated brutally, and traditional societies are not usually subscribers to modern ideals of animal welfare. Eskimos, for example, tend to treat their huskies harshly. But in spite of all this exploitation, abuse, and neglect, many people form bonds with animals from childhood onward. Young children are commonly given teddy bears or other toy animals, and they like hearing stories about animals. Above all, most like keeping actual animals. The majority of pets live in households with children. Hearing tales about frightening animals, including the wolf in Little Red Riding Hood, and forming relationships with friendly ones seems to be a normal and fundamental aspect of human nature. Indeed, our nature has been shaped throughout its evolutionary history by our interaction with animals. And all human cultures are enriched by songs, dances, rituals, myths, and stories about them. The evolution of human-animal bonds. The earliest named hominid species known from fossil remains are Australopithecus ramidus and Australopithecus onamensis, dating back over 4 million years. The first stone tools were used about 2.5 million years ago, and signs of meat eating appear about 1 million years later, around the time that Homo erectus spread out of Africa into Eurasia. The use of fire may have begun around 700,000 years ago. Modern humans originated in Africa about 150,000 years ago. The first cave paintings, including many of animals, appeared about 30,000 years ago. The agricultural revolution began about 10,000 years ago, and the first civilizations in written scripts about 5,000 years ago. Our ancestors lived as gatherers and hunters, with gathering far more important than hunting. The old image of man, the hunter, striding confidently out into the African veldt is a myth. Only a small proportion of the food eaten by today's hunter-gatherers comes from animals hunted by the men. Most comes from gathering done mainly by women. The exceptions are the hunter-gatherers of the plant-poor Arctic regions. Hominids and early Homo sapiens obtained small amounts of meat more by scavenging the kills left by more effective predators like big cats than by hunting for themselves. Big game hunting, as opposed to scavenging, may date back only some 70,000 to 90,000 years. In hunter-gatherer cultures, human beings do not see themselves as separate from other animals, but as intimately interconnected. The specialists in communication with the non-human world are shamans, and through their guardian spirits or power animals, shamans connect themselves with the powers of animals. There is a mysterious solidarity between people and animals. Shamans experience themselves as being guided by animals, or as changing into animals, understanding their language, and sharing their prescience and occult powers. The earliest domesticated dogs. The first animals to be domesticated were dogs. Their ancestors, wolves, hunted in packs, just as men hunted, and from an early stage, dogs were used in hunting as well as for guarding human settlements. Their domestication predated the development of agriculture. The conventional view is the domestication of wolves began between 10,000 and 20,000 years ago. But recent evidence from the study of DNA in dogs and wolves point to a far earlier date for this first transformation of wolf to dog, over 100,000 years ago. This new evidence also suggests that wolves were domesticated several times, not just once, and that dogs have continued to crossbreed with wild wolves. If this theory is confirmed, it means that our ancient companionship with dogs may have played an important part in human evolution. Dogs could have played a major role in the advances of human hunting techniques that occurred some 70,000 to 90,000 years ago. The Australian veterinarian, David Paxton, goes so far as to suggest that people did not so much domesticate wolves as wolves domesticated people. Wolves may have started living around the periphery of human settlements as a kind of infestation. Some learned to live with human beings in a mutually helpful way and gradually evolved into dogs. At the very least, they would have protected human settlements and given warnings by barking at anything approaching. The wolves that evolved into dogs have been enormously successful in evolutionary terms. They are found everywhere in the inhabited world, hundreds of millions of them. The descendants of the wolves that remained wolves are now sparsely distributed, often in endangered populations. The domestication of dogs long predated the domestication of other animals. Indeed, dogs may have played an essential part in the domestication of other species, both through their ability to herd animals such as sheep and also by helping to protect flocks against predators. Some breeds of dogs are very old. By the time of ancient Egypt, there were already several distinct breeds: dogs of the greyhound or Saluki type, a Mastiff type, a Basenji type, a Pointer type, and a small terrier Maltese type. Dogs were venerated in ancient Egypt. Some were even embalmed, and in every town a graveyard was devoted entirely to dog burials. The god of the dead was a dog or jackal-headed Anubis. In today's world, there are great variations from culture to culture in the way dogs are treated. In the Arab world, they are generally abhorred, partly because of large populations of stray or feral dogs, a source of dangerous diseases such as rabies. Even so, individual hunting dogs are admired and pampered. In other places, as in parts of Burma, Indonesia, and Polynesia, dogs are slaughtered for human food and are not usually well regarded. But in most cultures, especially where dogs are used for hunting or herding, or kept for no utilitarian reason, they are generally treated affectionately. The domestication of other species. Francis Galton, Charles Darwin's cousin, was a pioneer of modern thinking about domestication. He pointed out that relatively few species are suitable. Species capable of being domesticated have to meet certain conditions. They should be hardy and able to survive with little care and attention. They should have an inherent fondness for humans. They should be comfort-loving and useful. They should breed freely, and they should be gregarious and hence easy to control in groups. Sheep, goats, cattle, horses, pigs, hens, ducks, and geese all meet these criteria. Other species, such as deer and zebras, although gregarious, do not. And despite many attempts at domestication, they remain too wild to manage with ease. Cats are the only domesticated animal that are not gregarious, but because of their territorial and comfort-loving nature, they form symbiotic relationships with people while preserving something of their independence as solitary hunters. They revert with relative ease to a free-living, feral existence. Cats were domesticated much more recently than dogs, probably no more than 5,000 years ago. The first record of cats are from ancient Egypt, where they were treated as sacred, and it was forbidden to kill them. They were mummified in such enormous numbers that at the beginning of the 20th century, cat mummies were excavated by the ton, ground up, and sold as fertilizer. Horses were also domesticated relatively recently, probably about 5,000 years ago in the region around Turkestan. They may first have been used as draft animals. The first record of a horse being ridden is from Egypt around 1500 BC. Horses soon became important in war and in hunting, where they were more like comrades than slaves. In early civilizations, although domesticated animals were exploited for human use, there was still a pervasive sense of human-animal connectedness. Many animals were regarded as sacred, just as cows, elephants, and monkeys still are in India today. Many of the gods and goddesses were believed to take on animal forms or to have animal helpers. At first sight, there is little trace of this solidarity with the animal kingdom in industrial societies. Beasts of burden have been replaced by machines. Horses, donkeys, and mules are no longer our daily companions. The peasant's intimate familiarity with animals has been replaced by modern agribusiness, with animals kept on factory farms and in industrial-scale feedlots. Nevertheless, in our private lives, the ancient affinity with other animals remains. There are many birdwatchers, naturalists, amateur wildlife photographers. Wildlife films are perennial favorites on television, as are stories about animals, especially about dogs like Lassie and the Australian detective dog, Commissure Rex. But it is principally and most intimately through the keeping of pets that these bonds are maintained. Even though most people in modern cities no longer need cats for mousing or dogs for herding or hunting, these animals are still kept in the millions, together with a host of other creatures that play no utilitarian role. Ponies, parrots, rabbits, guinea pigs, gerbils, hamsters, goldfish, lizards, stick insects, and many other pets. Most of us seem to need animals as part of our lives. Our human nature is bound up with animal nature. Isolated from it, we are diminished. We lose a part of our heritage. The keeping of pets. All over the world, people keep pets. As Francis Galton noted in 1865, it is a fact familiar to all travelers that savages frequently capture young animals of various kinds and rear them as favorites and sell or present them as curiosities. Galton suggested that was the principal way in which many species were first tamed, through this kind of pet keeping, together with the keeping of sacred animals and the maintaining of menageries by chiefs and kings. In some cases, these animals became domesticated if they met the necessary criteria. I like Galton's suggestion that pet keeping preceded domestication, and I find it very plausible. And if wolves first became camp followers and then evolved into dogs, Galton's theory suggests a simple way in which this process could have been sped up, through people adopting cubs or puppies as pets. In ancient Egypt and many other parts of the world, in addition to the larger dogs used for hunting, guarding, and herding, there were smaller breeds that seem to have lived in the houses as pets. Ancient Greeks and Romans also kept house pets. Indeed, small dogs were found all over the ancient world and are the ancestors of many pet dogs of today. In Tibet and China, it was customary to keep both guard dogs and house dogs. Guard dogs were big and fierce and lived outside, while the small dogs lived indoors in houses and monasteries. Pet keeping, unlike the keeping of working animals, was something of a luxury in ancient times. Far more people are affluent today, and more keep pets. And pets living indoors as companions often become more intimately connected to their human family than animals living in a farmyard, barn, or kennel. In industrial countries like France, Britain, and the United States, the majority of households contain at least one companion animal. And over recent decades, as urbanization and prosperity have increased, even more households have kept pets. In the United Kingdom, for example, between 1965 and 1990, the total number of dogs rose from 4.7 to 7.4 million, and of cats from 4.1 to 6.9 million. The animal keeping habits of different nations probably play a large part in the forming of national character, but this is an area where there has been almost no research. We have only bare statistics. The highest percentage of households with dogs are in Poland and the United States, with France, Belgium, and Ireland next. Some of the lowest levels of dog and cat ownership are in Germany. In most countries, more households contain dogs than cats, but in some, notably Switzerland and Austria, there is a striking preference for cats as house pets. In recent years, some striking changes have occurred in the pattern of pet ownership. In the United Kingdom, the number of dogs declined, while the number of cats continued to increase. Since 1992, there have been more cats than dogs altogether, but there are still more households with dogs than with cats, because many cat-owning households have 2 or more cats. A similar increase in the popularity of cats has also occurred in the United States. By 1996, cats had overtaken dogs as the most numerous pets, with populations of 59 million and 53 million, respectively. As in the United Kingdom, however, there are still more households with dogs than with cats. Social bonds between animals. Most domesticated animals were originally social. As Francis Galton pointed out, they also tend to be animals with dominance hierarchies, which made it easier for human beings to control them. Even cats, although independent and solitary in their hunting habits, grew up with close social relationships between mothers and their offspring. The original social nature of domesticated animals reveals itself when they run wild. Charles Darwin, in The Variation of Animals and Plants Under Domestication, was particularly interested in this reversion of domesticated animals to their ancestral habits. In general, feral animals live in groups similar to those of their wild progenitors. Feral horses, for example, usually live in groups of around 5, and so do their wild relatives. Feral dogs live in packs and build dens, as do their wolf ancestors. Social animals are linked to other members of their group by invisible bonds. The same is true of human social bonds. Our domesticated animals are by nature social, and so are we. The bonds between people and animals are a kind of hybrid between the bonds that animals form with each other and those that people form with each other. One difficulty in understanding the nature of these animal-human bonds is that we understand so little of human-human and animal-animal bonds. We know that invisible emotional connections exist between members of a family, and we know that these can persist over time and keep people linked together even when they are continents apart. We know animals have social groups and that somehow the group as a whole is linked together so that it can function as if it were a superorganism, as I discuss in Chapter 9. This is most clearly observable in the social insects, like the ants, termites, bees, and wasps. It is plainly visible in a flock of birds turning and banking practically simultaneously with none of them bumping into each other. And so it is with a school of fish swimming in close formation, but changing direction at any time and responding rapidly to the approach of a predator. The nature of social bonds. There are many kinds of social bonds within species, like those between a mother cat and her kittens, a bee and the other members of the hive, a starling in a flock, a wolf in its pack, and a great variety of human social bonds. Then there are social bonds between species, like those between pets and their owners. All of these bonds connect the members of a group together and influence the way they relate. I propose that these bonds are not just metaphorical, but real, literal connections. They continue to link individuals together even when they are separated beyond the range of sensory communication. These connections at a distance could be channels for telepathy. Bonds between animals exist within a social field. Like the known fields of physics, social fields connect things at a distance, but they differ from the known fields of physics in that they evolve and contain a kind of memory. I have suggested in my book, The Presence of the Past, that social fields are an example of a class of fields called morphic fields. Morphic fields hold together and coordinate the parts of a system in space and time, and contain a memory from previous similar systems. Human social groups such as tribes and families inherit through their morphic fields a kind of collective memory. The habits, beliefs, and customs of the ancestors influence the behavior of the present, both consciously and unconsciously. We all tune into collective memories, similar to the collective unconscious proposed by Carl Jung. Termite colonies, schools of fish, flocks of birds, herds, packs, and other animal groups are also held together and structured by morphic fields, and these fields are all shaped by their own kinds of collective memory. Individual animals are linked together through the social fields of their group. They follow habitual patterns of relationships, repeated over the generations. Instincts are like collective habits of the species, or of the breed, shaped by experience through many generations and subjected to the rigors of natural selection. This view of instincts as the inherited effects of habit and experience is close to the thinking of Charles Darwin, most clearly expressed in the variation of animals and plants under domestication, and of central importance in the origin of species. The process by which this memory is transferred from past to present is called morphic resonance, involving an influence of like upon like across space and time. I discussed the nature of morphic fields and morphic resonance in more detail in Chapter 11 and in Appendix C. Morphic fields link together the members of a social group. A field embraces all the members of the group within itself. A member who goes to a distant place still remains connected to the rest of the group through this social field, which is elastic. Morphic fields would permit a range of telepathic influences to pass from animal to animal within a social group, or from person to person, or from person to companion animal. The ability of these fields to stretch out like invisible elastic bands enables them to act as channels for telepathic communication, even over great distances. At this stage, it is not necessary to grasp the details of the morphic field hypothesis, of which I have given only the briefest summary. The important point is that this hypothesis makes telepathy seem possible and even likely. But given that it is theoretically possible, does it actually occur? On the basis of the available evidence discussed in the following chapters, I conclude that telepathy is indeed a real phenomenon.